Hello, I'm Robert Greenwald. I want to thank everyone for the Horace Mann Award, and I'm really sorry that I'm not able to be there in person to meet, greet, talk, remember. But the magic of technology allows me to attempt to communicate electronically, to express my appreciation, and to talk about the work that I've been doing for the last 5 or 6 years with Brave New Films and Brave New Foundation. For those of you who aren't familiar with the work we're doing, we're a film, video company that focuses on talking about political issues, war, media, economic disparity. And I want to talk a little bit about what we started doing, the movement towards using current technology and distribution, and what we hope we're going to be doing in the future. For many years, I worked in the commercial film and television world. I did, I think it was 40 or 50 television movies and feature films and cable movies and miniseries. And then 2 events came together that helped change what I was doing. The first was 9/11, and I don't know about all of you, but I remember so distinctly and so clearly the initial pain, the terrible grief, the sadness, and then how fast that transformed into a kind of mindless rage and revenge. I was really quite troubled, frightened even, at seeing what was going on in this country. I have 4 children. A lot of the decisions I make are based on thinking about them, loving them, communicating with them. And I decided at that time that I needed to do more than I was already doing around the issues and the questions that would affect and are affecting our country. I had no idea what it would be. I thought maybe I would volunteer more for boards of directors, or I didn't know what the path would be, but I made that decision at the time that I needed to do more. And then a few months later, my father died. And I also remember very clearly thinking, just before I was going to get up to speak at his memorial service, what was I going to say? Like all parents, he was far from perfect. And I wanted to talk honestly, and yet, what was it that he had passed on to me? What were the things that made the most difference? And I remember that moment so specifically, thinking, of course, he had instilled in me, through his behavior, through the way he related, the notion of social values and the basic idea that you do more for others as much as you're capable of doing for them. So those 2 things came together, and I was also fortunate enough to have made a very good living in commercial film and television, so that I was able to plan to move from the career that I was currently in, which was very satisfying, and I made lots of different kinds of films. I love the filmmaking process, but I made a decision at that time that I was going to move towards becoming a volunteer. I think the last narrative film that I did before I began working full-time in documentaries had a strong impact on my documentary and political work, which was Steal This Movie, a film about the life of Abbie Hoffman. And even though Abbie is long dead, I lived with him for 2 years. I read all the books. I saw whatever video existed. And his brilliant inspirations about politics, levitating the Pentagon, throwing money on Wall Street, all of them, I think, impacted me in the sense of politics can be fun, the politics of joy, as he and the Yippies talked about it, and that it can be something you integrate into your life. And I've been influenced by that, I think inspired by that, and the subsequent documentary work, even though the documentaries themselves often were powerful and serious, we would try to find ways within them or within the storytelling or within the campaigns to be true to his spirit. That set in motion what became Brave New Films and Brave New Foundation. But again, I had no idea at the time that's what it would be. So soon after I made that decision, some friends came to me, and they came to my office and they had shopping bags filled with video cassettes. So you know how long ago that was. And they said they'd been to Florida. This was after the election. And they were interviewing people about what had gone on around the election and the various tactics that had been used, both at the election itself and the so-called recount. And they wanted to make a documentary about it. And I said, I don't know if it can do a documentary, but sure, why don't you try? So Joan Seckler and Richard Perez moved into this little office I had and began working on the documentary that ultimately became Unprecedented, the film about the Florida election.
Raucous demonstrations, including by congressional aides that had Republicans who had been flown in from Washington. There became this pounding on the doors and really kind of a Republican mini riot.
In Miami, the demonstration was led by Republican staffers.
The canvassing board, when they did reassemble publicly, just decided to stop counting altogether.
Well, I very, very quickly fell in love, total, complete love with documentaries. The form is incredibly pure, I mean, content aside, because it's all about the juxtaposition of images, where you put the images, what you contrast with what, how you lay out the narrative storyline. And I loved it. And there were no actors that you had to get out of motorhomes. There was no divas giving you a hard time. And maybe most importantly, there was no studio or network that you had to beg for permission in order to make a film. The next time I had an idea for a film, it was right around the time that the Iraq War had just happened. And I started reading and thinking and talking, and I realized that there was a strong story to be told about the reasons for going to war. And so rather than try to turn it into a fiction film at that point, I said, well, let me see if I can do a documentary. I don't know how to do one, but I'm going to try. My only experience had been with Unprecedented. So I began a film that ultimately became Uncovered, that told the story about the fact that no matter what your politics, we had not been given the real reasons for the Iraq War.
We were lied to, come on.
Well, wait a second.
Which is scared.
He said this already.
Poor judgment at that level is scared.
Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. Biological and chemical agent to kill millions of people. Massive and sudden horror.
Clearly, this was a campaign of deceit. This was misusing bad intelligence and ignoring good intelligence.
Weapons of mass destruction turned out to be essentially a fraud.
Preemptive war by its very nature is something that is entirely new to the United States of America.
It was a state that was on the verge of failure. Now it is a failed state. Failed states cause terrorism.
There is absolutely no reason why a policy of containment and international interlocking security agreements cannot work against in Iraq and Iran or North Korea.
The ties with al-Qaeda was just a scare tactic to exploit the trauma, the very real trauma that the American people have felt ever since 9/11.
I would rapidly point out that unlike almost anybody I know that holds office in this country, I've had two sons in uniform, both of whom have been in combat, and so I don't have to take any nonsense from anybody, nor will I.
Anytime you try to do something that hadn't been done before, there are actually all kinds of reasons you shouldn't do it, as I'm sure many of you know. But I'm from New York, I'm bullheaded, and I pushed ahead with a profound belief that even if they had found weapons, the information was being distorted. And I was able to get weapons experts and CIA experts, all kinds of people who were getting no attention in the media. And at that point, I had built a relationship with some friends at Move On and the head of the Center for American Progress, John Podesta. I reached out to them for some help with funding, which they provided after I ran out of funds myself. And more importantly, they became a way to distribute the movie, because what I knew is, having finished the film, we could not wait. We could not go around begging for conventional distributors, gatekeepers. Again, politics aside, all gatekeepers fundamentally protect the gate. And therefore, it's always slow, it's always hard, whether it's cable, whether it's PBS, whether it's network, whether it's commercial film, didn't matter. The process is a slow, difficult one. We had a timely film that was important to get out politically. Well, out of that realization and need was built alternative distribution. So I approached the Center for American Progress, who had all kinds of wonderful connections in the world of what they call the elites, elected officials, pundits, etc., in Washington primarily, and Move On, which was just pioneering the extraordinary use of the internet to reach people. So they came together. I was able to arrange the marriage. We did a screening in DC for the people we wanted to come and begin to impact and begin talking about the fact that the reasons had been distorted. And Move On offered it to their members. And in no time at all, thousands and thousands of copies of the DVD were sold. It was really an extraordinary moment in time. And so began my further love and commitment both to documentaries and also to alternative distribution. So in very short order, I was able to leave behind commercial film and television and began this commitment to political documentaries in almost real time. We were doing it right there, right now, right in the middle of it all. The next film became Outfoxed. And again, it was a result of an awareness, a growing awareness. This was just in advance of the 2004 elections, a growing awareness of how incredibly impactful a role Fox was playing, because back then the other networks were being deeply influenced by Fox. So the goal with Outfoxed was not to get the people who love and watch it to turn it off. That was not going to happen. But it was to affect other people in the media and to use the actual evidence, which was the video. And the technology allowed us to do it in a way that had not been done before.
Their methods are outlandish.
Why? Listen, cut his mic.
Listen, Chad, stop. Chad.
Thank you, James. I'm doing
Don't take your cheap little pathetic shot.
Their technique is outstanding.
Because he does seem to agonize and flip-flop over and over and over again.
Flip-flop on all these issues.
Terry's flip-flopping.
Flip-flopper.
Flip-flops. Flip-flops.
Flip-flops.
Flip-flops.
Flip-flops. Flip-flops. Flip-flops like crazy.
Opportunistic flip-flopper who doesn't have any principles. Is that a little harsh?
Their news is outrageous.
Why can't the city attract more minorities to the police department? Well, because black guys are afraid of water.
North Korea loves John Kerry.
Really?
Yeah.
The key thing is don't be inhaling, don't be ingesting.
Stay inside, don't drink or eat anything.
What would you say would be Senator Kerry's one or two major weak points that could be exploited?
Is Kerry's involvement in a group that's inherently violent?
John Kerry was scaring old people as usual.
Saddam must love you, and I'm sure he must.
Don't even try and do that inflammatory.
The way we deal with them is the way President Bush is dealing with them. You cordon the area, you search for them, and you shoot them.
In the next few days, they got to go in there and just kill as many of these people as they can.
Real journalism, fair and balanced.
Assuming that the unthinkable happens and that Senator Kerry becomes president.
And now they've been outfoxed.
I suspect your research has discovered the memoranda that were written by John Moody.
Every morning, there was a detailed list of subjects to talk about, not talk about.
This should be a trademark issue for FNC today and in the days to come.
The incredible story unfolds as ex-Fox News employees tell all.
There was nothing covert about the way the managing editors in New York or Washington operated. They made it perfectly clear what they expected from us.
Understand that this is an adjunct of the Republican Party.
There is no journalism at the Fox News Channel.
Outfoxed. Rupert Murdoch's war on journalism.
We used the actual clips from the network itself. We had all kinds of TiVos working, copying Outfoxed. We had volunteers all around the country who would watch the show at different times of day and night, and I'd give them general themes to look for. Kerry is French, which became a big thing for a while there, and other equally important issues for the state of our country. But by identifying the themes, having different people watch at different times of night and day, and our TiVoing them in our office, they would write down time code, and we still have these big books, these logs, to tell you how long ago it was, that they would put the information in so that then the editors could go through and pull all the clips, and we began to shape what became Outfoxed. At that point, the house parties were taken to a new level, and there were thousands of them. I can't even remember the number, and we sold several 100,000 copies of the DVD. And that continued from Outfoxed. The next one was Wal Mart, then it was Iraq for Sale, and shortly after finishing Iraq for Sale became another transformative moment. Somebody had come to me as we were finishing up Iraq for Sale, and two things came together. I became increasingly concerned because even though we were working very quickly for a documentary being 6, maybe 8 months, and that meant 7 days a week, 18, 19, 20-hour days, the news cycle was picking up in speed, and I had a growing concern that we would be working on a story. I didn't know what it would be, and the news would get ahead of us and the documentary would be outdated or irrelevant or something would happen. So as we're finishing Iraq for Sale with this concern eating on me, one of my colleagues at Brave New Films comes and said, you know, there's this new thing called YouTube. I said, what is that? He said, well, it's basically free distribution. Let's take a little clip from Iraq for Sale and let's put it up and see if anybody watches it. I said, that's a crazy idea. Why would anybody watch a clip on a thing called YouTube? Well, we put it up, and 3 or 4 days later, Jim walks into my office. He says, Robert, you're not going to believe this. I said, what? He said, 6,000 people have seen the clip. Well, that's an astounding number if you think about it. No publicity, no nothing. They had gone and found it. And I'm thinking, wow, if we were screening it, 6,000 people, that's a lot. Well, it kept growing, and in short order, it became 10, 15,000, I think. So at that time, we made a decision that we were going to continue to tell political, social, investigative stories, but we were going to use this new distribution system, YouTube, and use shorter pieces. Well, again, it was a time when we were at the height of the success doing the full-length documentaries with house parties, and we received a fair amount of criticism. Why are you changing? What's the reason? It makes no sense. And most importantly, in YouTube's beginning, there was absolutely zero evidence that people would watch anything other than naked ladies in the shower and cats on skateboards. There was proof that that worked, no question about it. Political video, 3 minutes, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, no sense whatsoever. Well, we decided to go ahead. We were very fortunate that we were able to get some funding because the documentaries, although they were money losing, they brought in some income. The shorts were zero income. But we went to the politically progressive community. I started to learn the challenges of fundraising and all that goes with it in the political world. Very different than trying to sell a studio or a network, a project. And I was able, over a period of time with my colleagues at Brave New Films, to raise some money so we could begin doing these short videos. We were pretty aggressive about telling stories, researching, pulling video together about some of the candidates for president. Now remember, this was a time before everybody had advisors saying, don't say that on TV, don't say that in front of a camera. So we did a very effective video several around the real Rudy, around Rudy Giuliani, who was running on the fundamental issue that he was our savior because how he handled 9/11. Well, in fact, how he handled 9/11 was scandalous. And who were the people who felt most strongly? The families of policemen and firemen. So we were able to reach out to them. We did serious investigative work. We did 6, 7, 8-minute pieces. And it started to have an impact, particularly with the press, which then impacts everybody else.
When I see Rudy Giuliani, if I see it on TV, I just turn the TV off, because the hypocrisy of running a campaign on a 9/11 agenda, and you're having people still dying and still becoming much sicker than they were a year or 2 years prior. It's really insulting.
He'd have every right to run on that platform if he was helping us, if he was walking around with us, if he was coming to our meetings, if he was coming to our organizations, coming to our unions, coming to the city and saying, give these people their benefits, give them their comp, give them their medication, give them their treatment. But that's not happening.
I haven't heard a word out of you, sir, as far as what you're going to do for the 9/11 responders.
After he left office, I mean, you may have to turn in your key to the city, but I don't believe turning in your moral compass and your responsibility to the people who trust you, that shouldn't fall by the wayside.
We've been abandoned.
I want to know, you tell me, sit down, meet with me, meet with some of the responders, and you tell us what are your plans for what you're going to do for the 9/11 responders.
And then we moved at some point, I don't remember the exact date, towards McCain. And we did the real McCain. And this was a storyteller's gift because, again, McCain, totally unsophisticated about video. He literally would say red, and then 2 days later he would say black, not thinking that the cameras were recording it, because old school politicians got away with that all the time. No more. So we did something called The Real McCain, 2 parts. I think the last I looked, it had 8 or 9 million views, 0 money to publicize it. And it just spread and spread and spread, because we were about to be in the middle of a presidential election. People were craving this kind of material, and then just sent it on and on and on. And then we also did a video where we went out, I'd heard about the number of homes he has, and said, you know, this is a perfect case of a picture's worth a million words. So we went out, we got video, we got photos of all of his different homes. We put out a video, McCain's Mansions. We have someone who works on press, who then got it to a lot of the press folks. One of them said to McCain,
how many houses do you and Mrs. McCain have? I think I'll have my staff get to you.
Which is pure genius on his part in destroying himself, right? It wasn't that I don't remember. It wasn't that, oh, well, I haven't visited them recently. It was the worst of all. I will have a staff member check. So that became a big, big deal. People had buttons made up about it. It was used in the campaign.
And here's one house America can't afford to let John McCain move into.
This new Obama ad lashes out at John McCain, who couldn't remember in an interview yesterday how many homes he owns.
Well, it's 7.
Obama today in Virginia.
If you don't know how many houses you have, then it's not surprising that you might think the economy was fundamentally strong.
And it helped cement the idea that this new media, this new technology could play a significant and important role.
Millions of Americans are facing threat of foreclosure, and they want Washington to do something.
Home foreclosures increased by a staggering 112% over the past year.
John McCain pointedly blamed the housing crisis on both irresponsible lenders and Americans who borrowed more than they can afford.
You know, it's tough to have to pack up and leave the house that we loved and the first house that we bought. We bought the house in 2003. In the end, our mortgage was 15.75%, and we could no longer afford to make the payments.
And 51 million homeowners are doing what's necessary, working a second job, skipping a vacation, and managing their budgets to make their payments on time.
If it was really just a matter of skipping vacations, for us it was a choice between whether we were going to put food on the table or pay the electric bill or pay the mortgage. I had to take a second job working at a children's clothing store at the mall, and my husband took a job working nights at the local Home Depot.
Any assistance must be temporary and must not reward people who are irresponsible at the expense of those who weren't.
I don't feel like I did anything irresponsible. I got my mortgage and I was making the payments and wasn't late on any. And then when it started getting out of hand, I tried everything that I could to be able to make the payments, and I just couldn't do it.
McCain's top economic advisor, Phil Gramm, resigns after referring to Americans as a nation of whiners.
I can assure Senator Gramm and Senator McCain that the people who are facing foreclosure are not whining, they're hurting.
One of the hardest things for us was to find a new place to live, because as we were going around looking at houses, every house we applied for was turning us down because our credit rating was so low because of the foreclosure.
Phil Gramm was working as a lobbyist for a foreign bank here in the United States. That is, the former Texas senator was paid to lobby Congress specifically about the mortgage crisis at the exact same time he was helping to craft Senator McCain's economic policies.
I've always been committed to the principle that it's not the duty of government to bail out and reward those who act irresponsibly.
It got to the point where our mortgage was $2,400 a month and my take-home pay was only $2,200 a month. So what were we supposed to do?
The wealthy. Always be interested in when people talk about who the, quote, wealthy are in America.
I don't think unless you've been in this situation that you can truly appreciate how hard it is for people.
Psst, do something. The next sort of highly public campaign we did was around healthcare. As the healthcare debate was going on, it became increasingly obvious to us early on that an important element was missing. What does every storyline need? It needs bad guys. It needs enemies. The healthcare debate was being done purely on a policy level, and there was no attempt to message or communicate around the essential idea that there's a reason you are not getting health care. And the reason you're not getting it is because the companies are incentivized not to give it to you. The less they give you, the more profit they make, and the more profit they make, the more the heads of the companies gain. So having learned from our McCain mansions, we went out, we identified 3 or 4 or 5 of these healthcare executives who were making obscene amounts of money, and we found their homes. We got video of the homes, we got pictures of their homes, and we were able to use it and then make it available to others who were working similarly in this area, similarly in the sense of trying to get some kind of health care passed, and we're able to use it in terms of creating messaging, dialogue, narratives that help tell the story of these executives.
Why do you continue to support a Nazi policy?
I got a book here called The USS Constitution.
Sean Hannity, and yes, for Michael Savage. They educated me.
Don't do this to us!
Brave New Films has launched a new online campaign called Sick for Profit.
As promised, a special comment on health care reform in this country.
We're proud to be able to bring this to people's attention and say, enough is enough, we're mad as hell.
You would hate to have profit so misaligned with the system that the way I make the money is by screwing you over, or in this case, not providing health care.
This is a story, Ed, that's not being told.
What motivated you to do this story and go after the executives?
Democracy is not a spectator sport. Well, now is a time to get involved. We made Sick for Profit so that everybody in this country who feels so strongly can do something, can pass it on, can talk to their neighbors.
Profits these insurance companies are making, folks, absolutely, they are obscene.
I'd like to know where the premiums that we pay are going.
What's really insidious about how WellPoint spends our premium dollars is that they spend nearly $10 million a year in lobbying fees.
We're counting on people like you to spread the word.
Incredible gross profits.
After Obama was elected, because the work we do, as you may have gathered by now, is essentially progressive in nature, although it's not partisan in the sense that we don't align with the Democratic Party, but it is progressive in nature. Soon after Obama got into office and we were hearing about more and more about the Afghanistan war, I had just finished rereading David Halberstam's The Best and the Brightest, And in the book, he talked about, obviously, the Vietnam War, and he talked about a series of fundamental questions that were never asked and that helped make the war go on endlessly, which was, what is victory? How many troops? What's the cost? The other assumption was that the Democrats would never speak up because of a fear of communism. Well, if you replace communism with terrorism and you ask those questions about Afghanistan, you have a very compelling case to be made that this is a problem that will not be solved with military solutions. So we decided to take on and build our Rethink Afghanistan campaign. We took enormous criticism, lost lots of funding at the time because people felt, even though it was called Rethink Afghanistan, it was not called, as some wanted to, Obama's a baby killer or other seemingly inappropriate slogans from the past, but people felt it was not right to question the president. We felt the opposite. We felt it was important to raise questions. This was a war, this is a question of war. There was tremendous pressure from the military-industrial complex on the president, and we could help create alternate narratives. And if you ask people these questions, they still cannot explain to you today what that war is about. People don't believe it's making us safer, and they know it's costing too much. And we hit those points over and over and over and over again. Not making us safer, costing too much. And of course, the worse the economy got, the stronger some of our economic messages got. So here is one of the economic videos we did around Rethink Afghanistan.
This tax day, millions of Americans all over the country are struggling to find work, yet an incredible amount of our tax dollars are still being spent on the war in Afghanistan, a war that isn't making America any safer.
Hi, I'm Raul Grijalva, member of Congress from Arizona. The residents of Tucson have paid $298 million of their tax dollars for the war in Afghanistan. That translates to almost 6,000 new jobs in the healthcare industry.
Hi, I'm Congresswoman Barbara Lee. Oakland residents have spent $376.7 million in taxes on the war in Afghanistan. That amount of money could have provided jobs for 5,411 elementary school teachers.
I'm Congressman Alan Grayson, Orlando, Florida. Taxpayers in Orlando have spent $476.5 million on the war in Afghanistan. That's enough to create 8,148 jobs in clean energy.
Tens of billions of tax dollars are wasted every year on a war that's not making us safer. How should this money be spent to meet the needs of your community? Tell us your story at facebook.com/rethinkafghanistan.
As part of the work, I also went to Afghanistan, and when I was there, was able to both film and get some extraordinary footage around the refugee camps there, the civilian casualties, which bring a human and moral dimension to it, which is truly heartbreaking. I mean, when you visit the third poorest country in the world, and you step off the plane, and you see the extraordinary needs, the hunger, the lack of jobs, the lack of health care, the lack of education, and right next to it is the millions and millions of dollars being spent on military solutions, which will never solve the social and economic and tribal problems. You don't have to be a genius to know this is not going to work. I came back from Afghanistan even more committed than ever to work on this, to continue to tell the story. And over time, we saw an amazing shift from when we first started, and we not only lost funders, but many people on our email list unsubscribed, said to us they would never support us again. We started to see a change because we kept on with those questions. We kept on with those primary points about costing too much, not making us safer. We raised the issue very clearly that no, it is not better for the women. We had women in Afghanistan talking about how bad it was. And not that it was us alone, it's never alone, it always takes a village, but we started to, as a friend said, we started to lay tracks down that then allowed other people to begin to talk.
Rethink Afghanistan.
It makes no fundamental sense.
I do think that women are being seriously mistreated, and if you watch Rethink Afghanistan...
The new NBC News Wall Street Journal poll shows just how badly the American people have turned against the war in Afghanistan.
48% oppose the war in Afghanistan, up from 39% a year ago.
U.S. commanders warn of more tough fighting ahead.
I didn't come out here to carry out a graceful exit or something like that.
We sent flip cams to people in Afghanistan that had been, the instructions were translated, so we started to get footage back from provinces. We did one about the voting fraud in Afghanistan. Many of you may have read about or seen the stories in the news about this fraud, but believing that a picture is worth 1,000 words, we've put together the video clips that we've received, all filmed with hidden cameras on cell phones at great risk to those taking the pictures. And we've edited them together so that you can see how widespread this fraud and corruption is, and how this election in no way represents the people of Afghanistan. We are now in Kandahar province. Someone is using a cell phone camera in order to get this hidden video, and the evidence is very clear of the ballot stuffing. There's somebody marking ballots over and over and over again, handing them to the other gentleman who's literally stuffing the ballot box. The gentleman in the military uniform who's part of the Afghan border police, he works for Abdul Razik, who oversaw widespread ballot stuffing in last year's presidential election. He and his men seem to be doing the same thing this year, and unfortunately, he's someone who has received very heavy United States backing. And over time, we hopefully, and I think clearly, had a real impact in the way it was discussed and the fact that more and more people were able to raise the questions, and of course, the horrible daily news about the deaths, the tragedies, the amount of money being spent, the corruption, all piled up and piled up. But I'm very proud of the work we did. And I hope now that we can begin to move that campaign from just Afghanistan to the larger issues around military-industrial complex, power of the Pentagon, the military thinking to the point you have something that's so-called liberal hawks, which is a phrase that makes no sense to me, but it's a large-term, multi-year project where we can hit the corruption, we can hit the fact that everybody knows how much money is being wasted, and from that, begin to hit the ideological questions that, no, you cannot solve all these problems, whether it be an invasion or it be a drone. You cannot solve them all with military means. You need to think more intelligently, more creatively. So that'll be one of our big programs going forward. We've also just begun work on the Koch brothers, and I'll show you some of this video about the 5 worst things that the Koch brothers have done. We also just had a renaming ceremony. David Koch has put his name on the New York State Theater, and we had a guerrilla action where people went, they renamed the theater, we projected some video against the theater, and here's a little bit of that to show you.
Stop the Koch brothers!
We were here at Lincoln Center, the home of the performing arts in New York City.
Stop the Koch brothers! Yeah, yeah!
David Koch spent millions of dollars to put his name on this theater.
Billionaires put their names on the front of our beloved institutions. This must stop!
We marched down to Lincoln Center and were led by Reverend Billy and his choir and a marching band.
Take back Lincoln Center!
The goal of the event was to expose the Koch brothers and to show what their name should really be on. We had a sign that said, "Wallet of the Tea Party," because he funds the Tea Party amongst other libertarian and extremist conservative values, and we wanted to put his name on those actions.
KochBrothersExposed.com.
So on the side of the theater, we played several short films that were produced by Brave New Foundation.
Oh my God, the name is changing!
People continued to congregate. They did chants until the police pulled up with paddy wagons. Reverend Billy was arrested by police. The message that we wanted to get across was that no amount of money could buy New York City or the public spaces in New York City, and I think we expressed that tonight.
And we have a team of 3 investigative researchers, and we're going to be doing a lot more Koch stuff. We've started a Facebook and a website, and we're working on that. And then finally, our third major campaign, which is also Facebook based. We're doing more and more, committing our resources not just to YouTube, but to social networking, is called Cuéntame, and it's the largest Latino-oriented campaign on Facebook. We did a whole lot of work around SB 1070 in Arizona, with a "Do I Look Illegal" t-shirt and campaign that became a catchword. We're now going to be doing voter registration there. We're going to be doing Get Out the Vote. We've done some of it. We want to do a lot more. And we've just launched a campaign around private prisons being the single biggest financier of some of the anti-immigrant legislation. So private prisons by politicians who then pass legislation to lock up immigrants so the private prisons make more money. And I think there's a very, very strong and important story to be done there. And we'll also be doing some work around LGBT issues in the Latino community, where culturally and religiously it still is a major issue, including some members of our Cuéntame staff who have not been able to talk about this openly and freely with their friends, families, and relatives. So if any of you would like to, please sign up for our email list. It's Brave New Films, or you can go to Facebook on any one of these campaigns, Cuéntame, Koch Brothers Exposed, or Rethink Afghanistan, or you can follow me on Twitter. I promise I don't do, if you don't follow Twitter, by the way, I know it sounds scary. I promise you it's a wonderful way to get lots of information without having to go to 100 websites, because you pick who you follow, and I find it actually absolutely fascinating and very simple to do. So thank you again for the award. I look forward to hearing from any of you by email, robert@bravenewfilms.org.